Welcome to Innistrad, the plane of reality that holds darkness even in the heart of its realm. Humanity, the prey of this world, hide inside walled cities and pray that their gates hold, while the ruling elite learn to deny time and indulge in vampiric bloodlust. Their sanctuary turned prison, yet even if you were to escape the walls, those who reached the woods would soon hear the howls of the midnight hunters. Wolves, when joined by their cursed brethren, quickly turn each hunt into a feast. Yet even if you find yourself free of the trees, the restless will soon find you. The shambling dead and vengeful souls move in near countless hordes, for the dead never stay that way for long. At least not in this place. Sadly, there are evils out here that are made by man's own hand, sometimes quite literally, as stitched together monstrosities march alongside the undead. Madmen who fancied Dr. Frankenstein's methods piece together body and limb, often until their greatest creation becomes their last. And yet, still more dangers lurk in the darkness, as cackling imps and brooding demons draw power from the blood squandered by the foolish. False promises harnessing the loyalty of the desperate and the betrayed. Despite death being far closer than the horizon, and the very realm causing druids to shrivel from its darkness, hope and valor live on in Innistrad. The common man, a survivor of countless brushes with death, are hardened souls, filling the ranks of the Cathar, part crusader, part priest. These men dare not go silently into the night, tearing as many stars as they can into the darkness before fading. Yet even when their bloodied bodies march back against the walls, Cathars are not done. Their very spirits, denying the afterlife, delaying the blessed sleep, in hopes that their comrades will not join them. Blades, be they real or ethereal, hold the gates, as the surviving masses pray for salvation. What may be most surprising is that in a realm as dark as this, their prayers can be answered. Angels, guardians of humanity, and the guides to the blessed sleep, lead their faithful Cathars into the fray. In light of our upcoming return to Innistrad, this series will focus on the overall story of this realm, as well as the stories that follow the locations and factions within this world. So, let's start in one of the most enduring provinces of Innistrad, Stensia. Stensia is a province dominated by the Gyre Reach mountain chain. Its length splits on one side, creating the border between Stensia and far safer lands to the west, such as Gavany or Keswick to the south. The other run of mountains streak along the waterside, isolating Stensia from both land and sea. Two large valleys tend to most of the province's people, each further segregated by large hills, isolating each and every village. The only pass between the valleys is the Hofsaddle Pass, a way not hindered by lush pine forests or sheer drop cliffsides. With only a handful of mountain passes out of the province and only one pass leading to the eastern sea near Nephelia, few foreign eyes ever gave effort to see these lands, something that came to Stensia's detriment long before our first visit to Innistrad. The land of Stensia was ruled by 3 different families. To the west stood Markov Manor, its estate overlooking the only reliable mountain pass to Gavany, a family that cared for the people and ruled with a harsh but fair standard of justice. The Markovs stood as an example of what a ruling family should be, as could only be expected from those so close to the holy city of Gavany. Nestled between the Half-Saddle Pass and the zigzagging pass to Kessig, called the Geitander, stood Castle Falkenrath, the family that ruled brutally, their tyranny justified by the ever-looming threat of the Kessig werewolves pushing their territory north. Their militarism ensured Stensia never became home to those howling hunters. To the east, watching over that lone pass to the sea, stood the Voldaren estate. In stark contrast to the Markovian rule, House Voldaren did little for their people, allowing the local villages to settle their issues in whatever way they pleased. As long as the tax collectors went undisturbed, the Voldarens were happy, and stayed in their mountain estate, throwing such lavish parties that wealthy and powerful outsiders would make the long and perilous trek to attend. A storm brewed between the mountains, and because of the height of its peaks, the storm never left. Be it rain or just cloudy skies, week after week, month after month, the storm denied Stensia the sun. Their crops withered, and their forests began to fill with bogs. When the storm lasted until the new growing season, their food stores began to wane thin. A famine began in the land, and the neighboring provinces could do little to help, as not even the Voldaren parties could pull the food-laden caravans through the thin passes. So little food restocked their stores that even the nobles began to worry. The Markovs, ever vigilant for their people, strove to resolve this famine. Edgar Markov, the alchemist of Markov Manor, worked tirelessly to find an alternative food source for his people. Yet even as the next growing season approached, he still could not find an answer. One night, while hunching over his workbench, he began to hear whispers. Words barely within his hearing. He thought himself mad, but when he listened to the voice, it began leading him to ideas. His experiments began to find success. With each created concoction, the whispers grew clearer, and he began to hearken to the instructions been given. But as he worked, Edgar realized that not all of the things being told to him were to solve the famine. Some instructions tantalized a far more personal desire of his. Promises of immortality. He was close to making something that could solve the famine. Edgar was sure of it. But not every creation has to be selfless. As the days waned, instructions about the famine became fewer and fainter, until all progress on the famine's cure ground to a stop. Frustrated by days of failure, Edgar began to listen to the other suggestions the voice gave. His personal desires and the voice's encouragement leading him on to invention. When the food stores became desperate, and the storm still did not leave, Edgar was no closer to solving the famine. Despite the pangs of hunger even affecting nobility such as him, Edgar's alchemy, mixed with rituals, brought him closer to what he desired. His sons, desperate to end the famine, helped Edgar, believing his work to save the people. An excuse they chose to believe, as the rituals began to include blood. Finally, The voice gave one last directive before falling silent. The blood they needed for the final ritual was the blood of Marie-Cez. Edgar, so close to his goals, barely even hesitated, but his sons balked. Marie-Cez, the angel, the being of pure white mana sent to investigate the storm, one of the few outsiders that actually came to Setsnia's aid. With silvered tongue and arguments for the greater good, Edgar convinced his sons to join him in his deception. Markov Manor invited Marie-Cez to aid them in their research. So close to solving the famine, they sought the blessings of an angel to finish their works. When she arrived, she realized the betrayal too late. Trapped inside Edgar's laboratory, Marie-Cez tried to convince the Markovs she had a way. She knew the storm was brought by a demon lord. She had found his name, Shilgengar. If they were able to defeat him and his cultists, the storm would cease. Some sons faltered at her words, but knew it was too late. Edgar activated the rituals taught to them by the voice, and when the rituals took effect on Marie-Cez, she panicked as she railed against the door, her screams accusing the Markov family to be the very cultists she had been seeking. Edgar and his sons finished the ritual and drained every drop of blood from her body. As Marie-Cez's form fell to the floor, Edgar drank from the blood-filled goblet, and the first vampire was born. Edgar Markov, the father of all vampires on Innistrad, turned to each of his sons and directed them to gather the family. Each of the Markov bloodline accepted this newfound gift. When Edgar gave his only grandson, Soren Markov, the blood blessing, traumatized by the transformation his body undertook, Soren disappeared. His planeswalker spark ignited, much to the confusion of his family. The first vampire family of Innistrad began feeding on their human peasants. Having finally finished his research, Edgar helped resolve the famine and save the people. However, the famine ended much faster than expected, as the vampires made far less mouths to feed. Through one means or another, the Markov family gained the loyalty of the Valdarans and the Falkenraths, turning each of those families into vampires in return for their obedience. Thus, with the endless clouds protecting the vampires from the sun, the ruling families of Stetsnia grew to become one of the most prevalent factions of Innistrad. While we will cover more about Stetsnia at another time, for now, I must thank you for joining me and hearing the tale of the first vampire.